Good morning, friends. Did you see that gorgeous moon last night? Big full moon. One of the things I like about full moons is they said that Saturday night was the peak, but they wax and wane, and so for at least 3 days we have a full moon, I think, because it's such a tiny sliver off each side that it looks full to me. And actually, I think you could count 5 days of full moon, but who's counting? Anyway. We're invited to once again join our hearts and minds and give attention to God in all kinds of presences. Let's start with an opening hymn, the Song of Peace, which is number 304 in the Green Worship and Songbook. You know that Phil and Gary Varvel have kind of opposing columns in the Republican, and one of Gary Varvel's responses are, I don't know if this was the most recent one or just before that, but it got me stirred up. And I've been, yes. And I had intended to write a response to that, and I didn't get it done. But it certainly stirred up some thoughts. And predominantly, I mean, I left with the impression, Gary, I'm so sorry for your image of God. He's a real tyrant. And if that's your image of God, that's what you're going to act like. And that's what his column was like. was full of commands. The very thing that Jesus kept getting in trouble for, breaking the law, and saying, "Hey, wait a minute. We got tons of laws, but you got to make some exceptions sometimes, and you got to keep focused on paying attention to God and what God wants." And it's not a matter of obeying a bunch of rules and specifications. But that's the tone of what Gary Barvel's column was about. But what struck me was, that really is a sad image of God. And he talks about humans being made in the image of God. Well, we strive to reflect the image of God, I think. If our image of God is one of love, it gives us a different direction than a tyrant who's checking on who's obeying laws all the time. Let us take a little time for some community sharing, and let's start with announcements. If there are folks on Zoom, we'll start with you. Anybody who has announcements, speak up. Not hearing anybody up there. Let's turn to here in the meeting house. Any announcements to share?
I have two announcements. One is, this is the last week to fill out the, I would say annual, but we don't do it annually, whenever we get around to it, congregational evaluation form. It's out on the table in the plastic thing standing up, or I did email it out a couple of weeks ago, and I probably will do it again this afternoon or tomorrow. You can email it back to me, or you can put it in the Ministry and Council mailbox, which is out in the dining room. And the committee mailboxes are down underneath the table. They're black. The others are brown and on top. And there's one that says Ministry and Council. Just stick it in there. And I will pick it up next Sunday. And I know I'll have at least one person call me Monday morning and say, "Can I bring it over, please?" Yes. And the second announcement is, of course, this is our soup lunch day. And I'm sorry for all those people at home, because we got enough soup for you too. So anybody that's here that didn't bring something, come on out, because we have enough soup there that we can all eat soup for 2 or 3 days, I think, actually. And I don't know what all variety we have, but I'm sure it's astounding. So everybody stay for the soup lunch afterward.
Thank you. Hi, it's Anita. I just had, this is because there's no other better time. Somebody had bought one of Jack's things, and it was left in one of the, is it yours? Okay, there you go. Never mind. There you go.
First, a question. JB, following joys and concerns, can you please give a prayer for this community? Yeah. You don't have to do it now, friend. Wait until you've heard what our joys and concerns are. They might overwhelm you. You might want to do it now, but we'll ask you to wait. So that was my question. This is my announcement. On Friday, April 12th, we will be holding here at our meeting house at 7 p.m., a concert for democracy. Our singer that evening will be Tim Grimm, and if you've ever heard Tim, you know what a delight he is. So he'll be here. He's under the mistaken impression that I will tell a story. He is wrong. I would much rather, if given the choice, hear Tim Grimm sing than me speak. So he will be here. He said he's trying to find some other musicians to come with him. The cost is $25. None of the people participating are taking any money. They're doing all this for free. And the proceeds will be divided between ACLU of Indiana, who is sponsoring this with us, and Friends Committee on National Legislation in Washington, D.C., our Quaker lobbying arm, so to speak, who is, even as we speak, doing fantastic work in Gaza. And so your support that evening will help their support there. We really want to encourage our younger friends and families to participate. So if you are 22 or younger or still in college, the cost will be $10. If you are under 12, there is no cost at all. So this is an excellent opportunity to bring grandchildren, children. We want to make it possible for as many people as want to participate and enjoy this with us. So again, that is Friday, April 12th at 7 p.m. And I have heard, it's still a rumor, that Mark Streetemeyer will be dancing, will be accompanying some of the songs with liturgical dance. Is this correct, Mark, or is this just a wild rumor that I need to put out right now? Well, I hope you all can join us that evening. If you've never heard Tim sing, he's wonderful. So.
JB, would you like to provide a community offering prayer?
Have you noticed how much better you feel when you hear other people's pain? Have you noticed how more flexible you feel when you think of Mark? Don't you feel how happy you are that you're not suffering with death in the family and friends and loved ones, even though you're sad? But at least we can remember their life. Joys and concerns are full of remembering life. And I pray that each one of you will remember today the life of others that are suffering with pain, and we can pray for them and be glad that we have joy in our health. Amen.
Now, who are the strong folk who are going to come up and take baskets around for our offering? We also have an announcement.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm here to talk to you today about something that's been on my heart for some time, and I've discussed it with various committee members and with Phil over time, and now seems to be a really good time to put it in action. I am going to ask you for an offering today, but you don't have to put your hand on your pocketbook. Okay? I'm going to ask you for an offering of letters. So I'm going to ask you to write a letter. I met with Representative Jim Baird, who's our congressman for this area, and we met up at Food Finders in Lafayette with a contingent of Bread for the World people. That's a non-denominational but faith-based organization about providing food for people who are hungry. So I thought this might be a good time because our group is so faithful to support the food charities and so committed to feeding others who might be struggling with food insecurity. And what we met about was the Food Date Labeling Act. And our concern was that a lot of food that is donated to pantries has to be thrown away. So for instance, this morning, I picked up this can out of my pantry to give. It's pinto beans, by the way, okay? But if you look at the back of it, or the bottom of it, it says, best if used by 3/8/24. This is good food. There's nothing wrong with this food, and there will be nothing wrong with it on 3/9/24. But if I give this to a food pantry, they are obligated to toss it. Yeah, we met in a food pantry, and it was heartbreaking. We actually handed Representative Baird lots of food that he had to toss because it either didn't have a date or it had a date that had just recently expired or was going to expire. So we're asking him in a simple letter. Here's mine. Y'all know Constance Ward? Here's hers. All right. And we have some others that I've already got people to write. And all it says is, please co-sponsor the Food Date Labeling Act so that more donated food gets to the hungry. All right. And I brought stationery and pens and envelopes and sample letters that you can write. And it takes, I've timed it 3 to 5 minutes, okay, depending on how wordy you are. All right. So you can follow the example, and I'll be out and about somewhere here afterwards. And if you would take that 3 to 5 minutes to not only give your food, but also to give your heart in an offering of letters, I would be terribly appreciated. And I'm going to hand deliver those to Representative Baird's office. Okay, thank you. By the way, I'm Terry. All right.
Well, last year I had a friend who was a little hard up for money, and he asked if he could borrow $100. And I said, absolutely not a problem. So I loaned him $100. And typically when I give money to someone, I give it with the thought in mind that I'll never see it again. It's just, just a gift, take it. But I saw him this week, and he paid me back the $100 that I had loaned him. And so I do all my banking now on a mobile app on my phone. So I went home, I spread out the $100 on my table, took a picture of it, and tried to deposit it, and they wouldn't take the money. So beware of those mobile apps. So I had to get in the car and drive all the way to the bank, and I was waiting there in line, and I noticed that the young teller waiting on me had her name on her name tag, followed by her preferred pronouns, which for her were she and her. I thought, wow, that's interesting. I've never seen that on a bank name tag before. And then I thought, well, that's just because she's young and idealistic. But then I noticed all the tellers working there that day had their preferred pronouns on their name tags. Even the teller who's older than me, whom I've known most of my life, and I'm pretty confident votes Republican. In Danville, we all know who votes for who. It's never a secret. I never expected PNC to lead the charge for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, but there you go. Back when I was young, you could depend upon the banks to be stodgy and traditional. But the times, they are a-changin', and over in St. Louis, Rush Limbaugh is spinning in his grave. I remember when idealism was the domain of the young. When I became a Quaker at the age of 17, I would get in ferocious arguments about pacifism, railing against violence and war, nearly coming to blows on several occasions. I remember being asked more than once what I would do if someone was trying to kill my children and grandchildren. I didn't yet have any children or grandchildren, so I would loftily say, well, I most certainly wouldn't kill the person. You'll be pleased to know your pastor has always been morally pure in hypothetical situations. Of course, now that I have children and grandchildren, I would do anything to protect them. Anything. And you would too, wouldn't you? These past several weeks, we've been reflecting on Quaker Qualities. The last time we were together, we talked about democratic discernment, that in our Quaker tradition, God's priorities are discerned by the community, by all of us together, not dictated by a book or hierarchy. We do not follow an inerrant book or infallible leader. Rather, we gather as equals, discerning together the priorities of God. Today, I invite us to think about another Quaker quality, that of pacifism or nonviolence, which in theory is noble and virtuous, but in reality is profoundly difficult and perhaps even impossible, because it usually only works until someone we love is threatened. The problem with pacifism is that by the time we reach the point it's most needed, it's too late. The anger is too hot, too high, the threat of harm too great. The fire department has been summoned after the building has been consumed. It was this realization that caused George Fox, our founder, to write in 1651 that we must live in, quote, the virtue of that life and power that takes away the occasion of all war. This means it isn't enough to be pacifists in times of war. We must dedicate ourselves to removing the causes of war. Being peaceful during war is being peaceful too late. It is summoning the fire department after the house is engulfed. What we should have done is hide the matches. In that regard, I want to remove from our Quaker vocabulary the words pacifism and nonviolence, which are too often exercised too late and too little, and replace them with what I will call consistent compassion. Consistent compassion, giving equal weight to each word. So let's take up the first word, consistent. I was reading an article recently about how not to raise a sociopath. And good article to know, good thing to know. How do we not raise and create sociopaths among us? And one factor in raising healthy, happy children is being consistent in your treatment of them. If one day I punish a child for being inappropriate, I can't reward them the next day for doing the same thing. My inconsistency will hamper their ability to discern right from wrong. My treatment of them must be reliable, predictable, and steady, not capricious, not erratic, not liable to change from one moment to the next. Think for a moment how often injustice is related to inconsistency. Think how often there has been one set of rules for men and another for women. Think how often white people have escaped punishment for abusing the law and black people haven't. Think how often the wealthy and powerful were free to do what the poor and powerless could not. Inconsistency has too often been the cradle of injustice and sociopathic behavior. So to speak of consistent compassion is to affirm the importance of a reliable and steady love for others, regardless of their station in life, regardless of their status, regardless of their position or rank. We do not treat some with dignity while denying it to others. This was and remains the basis for the Quaker rejection of titles and honorifics. We do not salute some and scorn others. We love with consistency, so there is never a doubt about where our commitments lie. We extend to all people the same measure of dignity and love so that we can speak with integrity about dignity and love. Consistent compassion. Compassion. Sympathetic concern for the suffering of others. Every war, every hatred, every injustice was birthed by our indifference to human suffering, by our failure to imagine and acknowledge the hateful and hurtful consequences of our privilege. Our failure to live with compassion is the root of all war and the parent of all violence. We will not live in peace until we first live in compassion. Compassion must be our first motion, our initial instinct. I know a Quaker who had an unimpeachable reputation as a pacifist. He registered as a conscientious objector rather than go to war. He could quote from start to finish every Quaker query ever written about peace, but could not find in his heart, up to his dying day, could not find it in his heart to make room in his life or his Quaker meeting for gay people. The man who would never pick up a rifle and aim it at another regularly aimed a rifle of rejection at people whose sexual orientation differed from his own. But we will not live in peace until we first live in compassion. Compassion must be our first motion, our initial instinct. When I first became a Quaker, I resolved never to kill another human being, which I realize now was too easy a thing for me. Now I resolve to do something much more difficult, something profoundly difficult. and that is to have a consistent and sympathetic concern for the suffering of others. Pacifism doesn't begin when we have decided not to pick up a weapon. Pacifism begins when we steadily and faithfully love even those people most difficult to love.
Having worked with sociopaths in the prison system for a long time, one of the hard learnings for me was you're probably not going to cure sociopathy. And I hate saying that because it's like I want to hold out for people's ability to change and learn for everything, but there are some folks that are just going to resist it for as long as possible. And we don't. I thought, of course, I would come up with something that nobody had come up with. Yeah, right. But one of the characteristics of sociopathy is exactly that inability or unwillingness to learn, which is why it's so critical to prevent sociopathy. And that, I think, has a parallel with war and conflict. Peacemaking and the prevention of war, hiding the matches, getting rid of the gasoline that's going to be thrown out. But prevention means we have to keep thinking about it on a constant basis. Let's move to our final hymn, which is in Worship and Song, number 120.
Thank you, Lee, for playing the piano today, and Mary for leading worship and sharing that beautiful song with us, friend. So I have a friend who, growing up, had a very difficult life. His mother died when he was little, and he was bullied a lot as a kid, and just that pattern continued throughout his teen years, and by the time he reached his adulthood, he was just very broken from it. And we were talking once, and I had began noticing this gradual change in his life, more happiness, a peace within that had seemed to elude him in the past. And I said, something has changed in your life, I've noticed this past year. What's happened? And he said, remember when someone used to do something to you and it would make you so angry that all you would do was sit around and have fantasies of revenge, of how to get back at this person in a hard and creative way so that justice would then be done? I said, oh, yes. I said, of course, I've never felt that myself personally, but I've heard others describe it, so I know what you mean. But yeah, fantasies of revenge, who of us haven't had those? Of course, we all have. I said, well, what's different now? He said, I'm giving that up. He said, I've given that up. He said, and now I have fantasies of forgiveness. Fantasies of forgiveness. I picture in my mind those people who've hurt me in life, who might even be hurting me still. And I imagine what it would be like to go to them and forgive them before they start treating me kindly. Fantasies of forgiveness. I said, are you doing it? He said, I am. I said, what's happened? And he said, it's been amazing. People who I thought were hard and rigid and mean and cruel, and that's all they were, have absolutely melted in my presence and asked my forgiveness. He said, and you can't do that very long without it changing your life in wonderful ways. So friends, we all have people in our minds whom we're upset with, who've hurt us, and we have in our minds created reasons to keep them in a hard place in our hearts. This week, let us practice fantasies of forgiveness. Let us go to people and let us express our affection, even if we have to lie at first. You fake it till you make it. Fantasies of forgiveness. That'll be our homework. Let's try it and see what happens. Stick around for soup. Joanne has made 2 of her specialty soups, one of which I will take entirely for myself, but you are welcome to enjoy the other one. Turn and greet friends.